This is the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
I'm sure you know that Father's Day is coming up this Sunday, and it makes us think about our own dads, how much we appreciate all they did for us, and also it makes us think about how we could be better fathers. That means being present, especially for those fathers that have teenage daughters. And if this is you, we're going to talk about it here. Joining us live is Catholic journalist and speaker Kate Wicker, Morning Air regular contributor, to talk about the importance of fathers, especially from a teenage daughter's perspective. Kate is a wife, a mom of 5 kids, a bibliophile, a marathon runner, eating disorder survivor, and a perfectionist in recovery. She's also the author of Getting Past Perfect, How to Find Joy and Grace in the Messiness of Motherhood, and Weightless, Making Peace with Your Body. Kate, thanks so much for joining us. It is great to be with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Father's Day, of course, is right around the corner this coming Sunday. Kate, can you talk about the importance of fathers in general?
Yeah, and obviously I'm a mom and not a dad, but I was a daughter, and I have a wonderful husband with our 5 children, 3 of which we have now an 18-year-old, 16-year-old, and 14-year-old. So we've got those oldest 3 are girls. And I just remember from when I was a teenage girl, you know, there's that transition, kind of, you're not an adult yet, you're trying to figure things out. It was a tumultuous time for me. I was struggling with an eating disorder then, but my dad was always just a loving presence. And he also taught me how he was so good to my mom, and still is. He would put little notes in her coffee cup and just truly treated her like his beloved. And it might have been subconsciously, but I think that somewhere inside my soul, I knew that if my vocation, my calling was to get married, that I would want someone who treated me and with such love and respect and cherished me. And I was fortunate to find that. And then looking at now my husband and his relationship with our daughters, you know, it's kind of funny. The other night we found our 16-year-old, she had found her way into our bed and was just kind of laying there reading. And we kind of joked with her. We were like, oh, her name's Rachel, but when she was little, we used to call her Baby Ray. And we're like, oh, Baby Ray has to be near Mommy and Daddy and blah, blah, blah. And we're kind of teasing her. And then she got up off the bed, was kind of giggling or whatever. And then my husband just kind of like tackled her in a real big bear hug. And she kind of rolled her eyes and was like, stop, Dad, you know, that kind of thing. But even if your children act annoyed, I have read so many studies about just when those girls are starting to grow up and mature, and maybe there are some dads who are very loving but start to feel uncomfortable, like they don't know if they should be as physically affectionate. All the research says, yes, you need to continue to give them both verbal and nonverbal signs of your love. The verbal can be a little bit easier, like, you know, you worked so hard on your test, great job, or I'm proud of you. And sometimes the nonverbal, I think it's easy as a mother, too, to kind of retreat and just think, oh, our kids don't need that anymore. They don't want their cuddles. Whereas, you know, my 6-year-old Charlie is always trying to hop on my lap and still get a lot of loving. The teenagers may not be like that. My oldest in particular, she's real funny about, like, if you come and sit right next to her. And she even told me once, she's like, I don't like to be vulnerable. And so she probably needs it more than anyone, you know, to be tenderhearted with her, both from the father and the mother. So I think we have to continue to seek out these teenagers, even when they kind of roll their eyes at us, and that dads out there need to know that this is how our daughters and all our children are sort of getting the first image of what a loving father is. And I know I've read stories about people who've struggled with their faith for a while because maybe they didn't have as close of a relationship with their dad, and they had trouble relating to God, this all-loving father, because they just couldn't imagine that, because maybe they didn't get that unconditional love. So fathers, you play a really important role in kind of setting the tone of what it means to be a loving father. And of course, none of us is perfect like God. And so it's okay if we mess up and we say we're sorry. Kids have, in my experience, have so much like boundless mercy and are just ready to love and forgive you, so long as you can humble yourself and ask for it and admit when you've done something wrong. But it's such a critical role as a father to sort of give your children that first image of what it means to be an all-loving father.
Well, Kate, it makes me think of the phrase "daddy's little girl." It doesn't matter, whether they're really tiny or even 16 years old, a teenager. They still continue to be daddy's little girl.
Definitely. And my dad, so growing up, he always called me MLMTD. No, wait. MLMD MTD, and it stood for my love, my dove, my treasure divine. And
Oh,
he
wow.
still signs, and he still signs my cards with those, like, addresses me as that rather than my name. That, I'm still his love, his dove, his treasure divine. So that's very touching. And I remember when I got married and my dance with my dad, how we were both like crying and just, because we had that such a close relationship, and he is very much a strong man of faith. He's always had a strong faith, but he's also been very honest with me. Like, I remember one time I was asking him if he'd ever had doubts, and he said, of course, it's normal to sometimes have doubts, but then you keep showing up. That's where faith comes in. So I knew I could trust him. He wasn't always just saying everything's perfect or no, I've never had doubts. And so I'm very lucky to have that kind of relationship. I also, unlike my daughters, I was the only daughter. So, I had that sort of special, definitely daddy's little girl. I was only daddy's little girl. But my husband does a great job of finding interests that my kids like and talking about them. And he really enjoys fly fishing. So he has brought, kids and taught them. And it's always funny because my most gregarious, outgoing child that likes to keep so busy is the one who has enjoyed fly fishing the most. And you would have thought maybe like more of the introverted. My bookish girl will sometimes go and just read a book, whereas the oldest one and him will actually be out there, in the river fishing. So just trying to find time. Of course, he's very busy, like a lot of fathers, and it doesn't take fly fishing trips and things like that to carve out time. Just yesterday, I had to take one of my children to just a well-child physical doctor's appointment. And when I got there, the nurse knows that we have a lot of kids and said, where's everybody else? And I said, oh, they're at home. And I kind of purposely, if I'm able to, or if my husband is able to, take a kid to an appointment, whether it's an orthodontist or dentist or even to soccer practice. And if we can carve out a little time to just have that child, even though it's something kind of routine, but you get that alone time where I find that the car is often a confessional because when they're alone with you, it's kind of you're in a captive audience and they'll just start talking. So finding time to do that, like even if it's driving to them to a basketball game on the weekend or whatever, there are easy ways or not complicated ways that require a lot of money and things like that to connect with your child.
Kate, why do you think that some fathers start to limit their affection with their girls at a time when they need it the most, especially during those adolescent years?
I think it's really hard for a lot of dads to see their daughters grow up and to become, more womanly, and so they may feel uncomfortable. My husband is in sort of a unique position in that he works in healthcare, so he sees all of that. Like, he's not afraid to go buy feminine products or anything like that. And, I know a lot of dads are. But just recognizing that that's just a part of them growing up, and that they still need, more than ever, like I said, they need to know what it means to be loved the right way and to be cherished. And they learn that from their father. And just one thing coming from an eating disorder survivor, don't ever comment on their weight, or like if you have an issue with what they're wearing, instead of saying something like, you're not really going to go out like that, are you? That's more of a shame approach. To approach your daughters as, you are so beautiful and cherished as me that I want you to know that you have so much more to offer the world than your skin. So kind of, if you grew up kind of in an old school, like trying to control and like worrying about things like that, to try and flip it and just make them know how loved and cherished they are. And that's why you're showing concern for them, to go out in something that maybe you feel like is inappropriate. So yeah, those are just little things thinking about, both from my perspective as growing up as a daughter and watching my teenage daughters, and how well my husband has navigated these, kind of crazy years with, especially having 3 teenage girls at once. Lots of stuff going on.
How does having that security, that love and acceptance of a father really help teenage daughters, especially during this very challenging time?
Well, I think teenage daughters, they want to feel safe and loved and cherished. And if they get that from their father at home, they will be less likely to look elsewhere. And the whole dating scene, that sometimes it's a parent's worst nightmare, because sometimes the child might choose someone that you pray that if their vocation is marriage, I'm already praying that they meet the right spouse for them. Because I really feel like that is such a critical thing, and they need to have that solid foundation. And they learn, like I was talking about, even from my father, they learn how in their home, how a woman should be treated and cherished. And, one thing my husband and I also do, like sometimes he'll come home from work and kind of over dramatically, like dip me down into a dance or whatever. And, of course, all the teenagers are rolling their eyes or whatever, but they loved that we have a happy marriage. And none of my daughters have really dated yet. I mean, they've gone to dances and things like that. And I was talking to my oldest, who will be going to college this fall, about, the dating scene and if she has any interest. And she just basically has said, like, she's not going to waste her time with someone that isn't going to cherish her and be the right kind of person. And I think she saw that she has a dad who just loves her so much and values her for who she is, and doesn't want to put herself in a position where she doesn't feel that way. So I think that these teenage girls that are trying to figure things out, and if they can come home and have that stability and be able to joke with their dad, talk to their dad, have their dad spend time with them, then they feel affirmed within the household, and they won't be as likely to turn to other things. Now, that doesn't mean any of us, any parent, we can never inoculate our children against all angst, any disappointment, struggle, suffering. Some of that is just a part of life. I'm a good example. I came from, my parents were loving parents, and I developed an eating disorder. So there are things that we can't control. And one of my favorite sort of parenting, encouraging things to say is that you never let go of your children, but sometimes you have to let them go to God, and that you have to put something in God's hands. So you show up, you love them the best you can as a dad, then you also understand that they were created to fulfill their own will and God's will, and there's only so much you can do. But you can always pray. You can always pray for your daughter, and pray too, like, how can I better connect with them? If you feel like there is a wall kind of emerging between the two of you as your daughter gets older, pray about it and try and figure out a way that you can reach them, because some teenagers are easier to reach than others. Some really shut down. Some can get emotional or even angry. All three of my teenage girls have been so different, the way they interact with us and the way they express stress or things like that. My oldest tends to just never act like she's stressed, but she's the one that sometimes I worry about, because everyone gets stressed sometimes. And so just giving her an opportunity to be with me or her father, and giving her time to open up if she needs to. And sometimes your kids won't, but I think we underestimate, dads sometimes might worry that they don't do the right thing. They might think the nurturing doesn't come as naturally to them. But if you're just there, I think we sometimes don't realize the power of just presence, even if we don't do or say anything, or even if we do something wrong. Just the fact that we were there, that we showed up, makes a tremendous difference in our children's lives.
Kate, do you think that a father having a loving and a really trusting relationship with his daughter will translate to having a better relationship, a more trusting relationship with God?
Yeah, I wrote once for a devotional. I do some writing for Living Faith, and I remembered an image that just stuck out in my head of my younger brother has 2 daughters, and he is such a hands-on, amazing dad. Like, he has so much fun with them and just loves his girls so much. And when the oldest, who's now 9, was a baby, I remember watching him throw her up in the air. And it kind of, as a mother, made me a little nervous, but he caught her every time and she was giggling. There was no fear whatsoever. And I remember playing a game with my dad where he would hold us and he would use his hands like his footholds, like we were climbing up a mountain, and then he would drop one so one leg would fall, but he would never let us fall off the mountain that was him. And those little playful games really do teach trust in your father, and then also can translate well when you start learning about God and this loving, all-powerful presence in your life that isn't just supposed to be like some magical, omniscient being in the sky, but is someone, not something that you're supposed to have a relationship. I think it is much easier. It's never impossible. God calls all of us, but it's much easier if you've had that trusting relationship with your father where you knew he was there to catch you when you were falling. I think that really can, bring that more alive to people as they grow in their faith life. I did a very brief Google search, and the amount of evidence is crazy. Everything from more involved fathers help with better academic outcomes, less drugs, better empathy. And I was curious about the empathy part, and then I read a little bit more into it that especially for a girl, if you can relate to your father and understand him, then all of a sudden you're growing a greater empathy for someone who's different than you because you're a girl and he's a dad. And I hadn't ever really thought about it that way. And like your dad is showing empathy to you, even though a teenage girl is vastly different from a middle age or an older man or a younger man. So I thought that was an interesting connection that research has found. So the research is clear. Our Heavenly Father has taught us how important it is to be a loving father. So again, I just encourage all the dads out there to have a very happy Father's Day and to just love them the best you can and to forgive yourself when you fall short and to know that you always have prayer in your toolbox to help with things. So happy Father's Day to my dad and to my husband and to all the dads out there.
And I so much appreciate your perspective. Kate, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.